Okay, I'm Fred Robinson. I'm chair of the Board of Governors actually at Waddington Street Centre in Durham. Waddington Street Centre is a mental health resource centre. It serves people who are living in the community with major long-term mental health difficulties.
Brilliant. Fred, what do you see as a positive impact and opportunities rising from the Coalition's plans to reform the NHS and create a big society?
We have a very interesting government at the moment, don't we? A government that's intent on quite massive change quite early on in their administration. So we have change everywhere we look taking place. So certainly a big shake-up of the public sector. A lot of people are losing their jobs, of course. It's a time of great uncertainty. But the government actually says it wants to shrink the state. It wants to make the state smaller and put a lot of public services through private sector organisations and also through voluntary and community sector organisations. I mean, it remains to be seen how it'll all work out, what the balance will be. I think there will be some really good opportunities for the voluntary sector, for organisations of the kind that Mental Health North East serves, but also there's some real threats and dangers, and I think people are feeling very insecure and worried at the moment, and that's perhaps as it should be.
Fred, what do you see as a potential negative impact to changes in services and reductions in local authority and NHS funding?
Well, clearly the kind of shake-up that we're seeing could have major problems for people who use mental health services. People with major mental health difficulties are amongst the most vulnerable in our society and really are very scared, I think would be the word, scared of change to services they've grown to, that they used to have grown to rely on. In my own organisation at Waddington Street, we're doing everything we can to maintain those services and to support our very vulnerable service user group. But there will be people who will lose services that they've grown to depend on, and that's very worrying. Obviously, we have big problems at the national level, just dealing with the deficit, and we do need to deal with that. But we'd be anxious, I think, in the voluntary sector to ensure that some of the most vulnerable people are kept safe and secure, and their services are protected. And that's, of course, what we're fighting for.
Brilliant. In relation to government changes, where do you see your organisation in 1 year's time?
It's really hard to look ahead.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody in the voluntary sector is struggling to think a few months ahead, let alone a whole year ahead. I think I'm very confident as chair of my organisation that we'll still be very much alive and kicking in a year's time. We've got decent reserves, we've looked after ourselves as an organisation, and we can sort of ride the storm, as it were. I'm very worried about smaller organisations and organisations which don't have reserves and whether they can actually cope with the changes ahead. Looking ahead, I think, to a year's time, where will we be? Well, we'll have somehow coped with reductions in our funding from local government, and quite significant reductions. So none of our staff will be getting wage increases this year, for instance, so that will be tough for them. I'm hoping we'll still have the same number of staff in a year's time as we do now, but I can't actually be sure. In a year's time we'll be hit by all the benefits, the wonders and the fears really of personalisation, people being able to buy their own services with their own budgets, and it remains to be seen, of course, how well as an organisation we respond to that particular challenge. I think the biggest fear actually for us at Waddington Street in particular is where we'll be with all the educational work that we offer and that we do, because it may well be that quite a lot of our service providers will no longer be able to get that educational activity free, and that's a major problem for us at the moment. So everybody's experiencing cuts, and everybody's experiencing them in different ways, and everybody's trying to find a way through. I'm confident we will find a way through, but I am worried that some organisations won't.
Brilliant. If you had the ability to ask a question of someone in power and or influence, who would it be and what would you ask?
I suppose the only questions worth raising with people in power are big questions with people with the most power. So I guess I would go to the top. I would actually quite like, I think, a couple of pints with David Cameron, saying, what motivates you? What do you think you're trying to do? How are you going to protect the most vulnerable people in society? And above all else, I think, okay, I understand, this is several questions of course, I understand you need to make cuts. Why don't you go after the bankers?